what's really tricky is where does that come from? Like, okay, so talking about law of attraction and manifesting, where do your desires really come from? And I feel like it's almost the same question as where do your thoughts come from? Because if you become the observer and the witness, the thoughts don't stop coming.
So this is my working theory on that. All life there is a drive behind everything that we would call alive to become more than it was before. It's that simple. So there is recognition within our consciousnesses of things that excite us one way or the other, and so it's a point of interest, or it could be deficiencies, but I think it's mostly not based on so that's why it's like there's this concept of don't focus on improving your negative things. Focus on just moving forward with the things that, and there's a balance between that. But the idea that if you're focusing on improving what you are excited about improving, is that it's like a rubber band. It pulls everything else along with it. You can't help, and that we as life forms are always excited and striving to go to that place that takes us in the direction of whatever it is that excites us.
Yeah.
And so that's where those impulses come from, are some subconscious or maybe even conscious, recognitions of things that excite us.
I have a theory, which is essentially taking that question and continuing to. So if you ask the question, where does that come from? And someone might say that it comes from you, or it comes from I, or it comes from me. But then it's like, what is that? Who are you? Who are you? Who are you? Who are you really? And when you peel all the ego structures, I see two things. And I almost kind of think of it as soul and spirit. And really it's like there's a spontaneous expression. There's a spontaneous flow that's always happening, right? And it's like you can either be in it 100% or you can be completely observing it. And I don't know how to explain it, but whenever we have reached a level of self-acceptance where we can just allow ourselves to be spontaneous in our bodies, I don't even know, how can you say where is that coming from? Where is that coming from? You're just witnessing it as it's happening.
So I agree, but what I think in my estimation, what it sounds to me like you're describing is you have that, there's two things going on there. There's the you, which is the ultimate just yes, no, binary on-off decision making that ends up happening at every split second a decision can be made.
Okay, hold on, let me tell, because that's what I define as, this is my own language. But this is what I define soul as.
That's all right.
Soul
okay
is the witness and the cultivator and the nurturer of divine spirit, of divine flow. Mm-hmm. So it's like source energy, spontaneous, authentic energy is flowing through you.
So that's what I was
and you're the cultivator, and it's like shaping a song. You know what I'm saying? When it's like flowing through you, it's like it's your responsibility to be the nurturer of that energy. Yeah. In the same way that it's just like when a woman gets pregnant and a baby grows in her belly, right. Like she's not consciously doing that at all. Like we just have this sexual process and then it grows, but then it's like cultivating, actually making sure that baby is safe. And
so that's a really interesting thing. I think there are processes that are that just they're involuntary, to whatever degree, like involuntary muscles. Like I'm not thinking about my heart, but then there is really interesting stuff because you see that ascetics and yogis can control different bodily functions and stuff like that, and so that is where I was going to say, describing two different things, is that you have the ultimate binary on-off soul. That observes and or decides, and then you have this flow, this recognizing tides, you could call it, or currents, and there's an amazing thing with this, and I've said this a lot, and we all make different decisions based on our own health, or happiness or things, drives, whatever, to either go with the flow or even not go with the flow, but still go into a direction. And there's advantages of these different approaches at different times too. In other words, you may want to write a song. So you're feeling all creative and you just spit out this amazing piece of work, but it's not quite done. You're like, I really want to finish it. The next day you get together and you're like, I don't have it. So if you were following the flow, like just current only rule, basically, you would walk away from that and just try and find where your other current any current that you can pick up on, that would take you. But as a captain on your own ship of destiny, you can choose to manifest, and you can find and get into a current, or it's sort of like that fake it till you make it. As you start sitting down to write the song, you start to find or create that connection and flow.
I feel like what you're talking about is like the experience of, I think we are all creating our own worlds, and it's like when you're riding your bike down the road or whatever, and you're listening to either jazz or like progressive metal or blues, it's gonna completely shade your present experience, which is a moving experience, like totally different. And I feel like that's what it is. It's like you can choose to perceive this reality in whatever flavor you want.
Now that's actually different than what I was saying, but I love that concept in general. And I mean that could be a whole hour-long conversation we could dig into at some point. But because Jason and I have been digging really deep into a lot of that perceptive manifestation, and so basically that when we perceive something in a certain light, it can help to manifest. It's self-fulfilling. It can be self-fulfilling, and so recognizing the power we have with that, and being mindful of things as they come up, and recognizing where they're truly coming from, the places of ego, fear, things like that, and going, wait, then that's not what I just described in my own head, the narrative I created around these feelings and thoughts, that I said this person's action, what's fitting into this pattern that I was creating. All of that is bullshit. If I step back and go, wait a second, none of that, I've got no real evidence. I've created this, and I've said that their actions are fitting. And this is where people get triggered, all right? And where emotional responses happen is that it's an early warning recognition system. That's what I used to call like emotions in general. They're an early warning pattern recognition system. On a subconscious level or whatever, we say, okay, this person is acting similar to somebody who abused me. And therefore they're triggered, and you're like, you're being abusive. It's like, all I did was ask you a question. Well, their ex might have asked them questions in a very abusive.
I feel like this topic in itself could go in so many different directions. And we were talking about this last night, but how these situations, I believe, will always keep manifesting, and it resurfaces a wound. And it's literally bringing it back to the surface so that you can be present in it and heal. And it's literally like you being what allows you to heal is being present with yourself, and not one of Teal Swan says this, like, stop abandoning yourself. Essentially, like being with the feeling, pay attention, integrate now, acronym for pain. Like be there for yourself unconditionally, and not like, I gotta get. That
actually has been tough for me. It's been a journey for me. Like, I'm very quick to give understanding and love to others. And I've had to get more mindful about providing that to myself. And but that's really, I agree with that completely. That whole like one life, and this is where I mean. So sometimes flow dictates where you're at too, because it brings things to the surface. Somebody may have been perfect and in complete mental and emotional health, they start dating somebody, and the interaction and being vulnerable allows for things to come to the surface, and sometimes in very, very quick and ways that they're not prepared for. And And so there's things like that happen that are really. But you're right. It's just basically yourself, your universe, whatever you want to call it. But it's a process of surfacing, and that's why I really like the whole mindfulness practice in general, because you build a skill of recognizing what is coming up.
Yeah.
Even sometimes recognizing where that's coming from, like an ego, a fear, I recognize the experience exactly where
that is totally what Eckhart Tolle talks about in Power of Now. Is like literally the ability to be the observer of thoughts and feelings without any judgment or analysis.
Or
and
not
then,
being a slave to them in any way, like in action, not reacting.
Yeah, totally. And then you really, so much power comes from that.
Yes.
It's
because you are truly, you truly become a master of your own destiny, and you become that captain on your ship. You literally start steering that ship in the direction you choose based on what you, in what I would say is a higher sense of mind or heart or both, higher sense of being, in what you truly desire or think would be best, rather than reactionary and based on the past.
Yeah.
So that is like it's freeing of the past.
I just had an epiphany about that, and essentially like on the same lines, in the same way that an animal defends itself when it's injured, or like acts like there's nothing wrong and whatever,
goes for the blade,
doesn't want to get, you know what I'm
cornered,
saying?
Yeah.
And ego structures are designed to protect you from past pain, like, you know what I'm saying?
Yep.
So it really is in a natural kind of way. It's meant to protect us. But I had this conversation with this guy recently who was saying so the ego structure is there to protect us, but it's like once we like heal these wounds and get past that, then it's like there's almost like an attitude of being grateful for the ego structure, but being like, don't need you anymore. Like I'm going, like where I'm going, like I'm connected with source now, and I'm going.
And I love that. That reminds me of this concept of like where I diverge from a lot of Eastern philosophy thought of like abandonment of ego completely. To me, in a pure sense, ego is nothing more than a point of perspective. And it is, of course, something that we arrive at based on all these experiences and even, quote, biases to whatever degree. As we are unfolding to the truth of what is, then we have different understandings of what is, and that would be biases and or a point of perspective in space, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
But there is healthy and unhealthy levels of ego, and I think that there's that might even be fluid at different points in time for some of the reasons you stated. If you're in an environment that is toxic, you have got to protect yourselves, and so it may be necessary. It's really interesting because I grew up in a family where we were loud, and there's 6 of us, you know what I mean, and so it just was a loud environment a lot, and so we sometimes, and I've seen this happen, where somebody might be being harsh with me. I actually dated a girl who I was like, just look, I'd be always calm and this and that, and then she would, escalate and until I like raised my voice, she didn't respond. She didn't hear what I had to say because she was so conditioned to only hearing from a certain type.
Oh, yeah.
So that then basically the only way I protected myself was to operate on a level that I didn't want to operate on, and of course that didn't work out.
Yeah.
But it's like it was really interesting to me because I'm like, she wouldn't even hear me unless I presented it in a manner she was used to, and that penetrated through her ego and her self-righteousness and whatever. And so that is an example of like an ego perspective and or the self-preservation ego perspective having to do a behavior that was protective And without doing it in that scenario, it wouldn't. There could have been, and there may have been more damage that occurred to my sense of being. And that's defining the boundaries, and this is what we're constantly doing, is figuring out and defining our boundaries with each other, and allowing ourselves to both find an ethos for getting closer with each other, an approach that is ethical and that allows us to be more vulnerable, as well as still seek to connect further. Because
it's a trippy thing, because then you got like all the love languages and stuff too, and that's and it's not, it doesn't always operate on feeling, that was an epiphany that I had recently, is like sending messages of gratitude to people even when you don't feel like it, but actually taking the time to do it, and it ends up, I've had that happen like recently, where it impacts them and then it comes back. It's like when I read the book on love languages. It's like if you decide to love someone in their love language, whether it be gifts or services or touch or whatever, like that fills their tank, right? And then they can love you in your language.
Yeah,
and
there's a lot of stuff that goes in with that, but yeah, absolutely, because they recognize